welcome to all the panelists and absolutely a very, very warm welcome, Gayatri, Aniruddha, Ashwani. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and share your views on what is the new PR business model ahead. And we're going to do a very deep dive into various aspects of how the PR business is going to evolve and how are the experts dealing with this crisis from various points of view. First on is Aniruddha Bhagwat, who is co-founder and managing partner with Ideosphere Consulting. Welcome, Aniruddha. Would you like to first kick off with your views on how do you see the overall PR business evolving?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, Parul, Ashwini, Gayatri. A pleasure to be on the panel with you guys. Our journey started actually much before this pandemic hit, and really about a year ago, our leadership started really questioning what our business model was going to be like in the future. What are the customers kind of looking at, and what do they want to really get from us? And one of the things that we started doing was started going back to our past clients over the last 8-9 years, trying to understand what was their ask, how did we deliver, what was the satisfaction score that we gave ourselves in each of those customers. And what we started seeing, that there was a subtle evolution over the last 9 years that Ideosphere has been there, that with our clients in terms of how are their asks changing in terms of what they expect from communications. And as you know, we've just launched a white paper today on the changing expectations from PR and communications, and really that was an accidental outcome of us questioning ourselves and trying to figure out what do we want to really do in the future. And just to kind of give a little bit of foreshadow in terms of what really came out of these expectations or the white paper that we created, is that we also, after looking at our own customers, we started speaking to industry experts. In fact, I had a long chat with Gayatri also, who has contributed into our white paper. And one of the things that really came out was that today, number one, customers are looking at performance-driven agencies, right? Which means that they are looking for specific business outcomes. It's not only about AVs anymore. Obviously, it's not about engagement levels. It's about, are you solving my business challenge, right? Which means that even pricing models are slightly changing in terms of outcome-based pricing, performance benefits. Those things are changing. The next thing that we are seeing that customers are looking at is they want single window communication partners, which means that they don't necessarily believe that you can do everything, but they want you to be accountable for everything. So what we've started doing at Ideosphere is building up an entire partner ecosystem, because we understood that we're really good at a few things, and we are okay at the others. So we said, why don't we get partners on board of the things that we are okay in? And we started getting partners on board over the last couple of years. We built a digital platform which allows us to rank and rate those partners, understand their work, understand the type of collaborative revenue that we are creating amongst that ecosystem. And the third one is that clients expect depth-driven teams. They want somebody they can hold a business conversation with. They want teams to be able to understand their challenge, be able to get in under the skin of themselves, of their customers, of the wallet of their customers in terms of share of wallet. And these are the types of things that they're really wanting out of the new age teams that are there, which means that it's important for communication consultancies now to really create business models and proprietary tools that they can use to kind of change. Some of the business asks that we've been saying is, can you help me scale? I want to create a new category. I want to attract new investors. I want to attract talent. Uniquely, we also get asked saying that, hey, I want to be able to create my legacy, and how can you help me create? And this is with senior leaders or CEOs or owners of companies. How do I create my legacy? How do I create my CSR and sustainability outlooks and things like that? So what we are really saying is that the asks are changing, Parul, and obviously when our customers are changing in what they expect from us, then our business models are ought to change, and that's how I would begin with this.
We're going to come back to you, Aniruddha, later for more of that. I'd like to go to Gayatri now. Firstly, Gayatri, congratulations. You've completed this May 25 years in the communication business. So this is a wonderful occasion for us to get your views. So in your opinion, with COVID, what is the biggest change in expectation that clients would have? What is the biggest ask that they would have from the PR community?
Look, we are facing the biggest crisis of that any one of us has gone through ever. All of us in the years that we have spent in communications, we've handled crisis, but nothing of this magnitude. Here we're talking about, lives, livelihoods. We're talking about, countries shutting down. It's a level of crisis that, none of us have experienced. Really, what business leaders are thinking of at this point in time is, how to get back to normal. And getting back to normal is not about, the government saying the lockdown is over. It is about, people saying that I feel safe enough to go to the shop to buy, or I feel safe enough to go to the office to work. And when I go into the office, whether I will be productive at the level that I was prior to this crisis. I mean, those are things that people are grappling with. So right now, for communications people, I think what business leaders are worrying about is what communications people should be worrying about as well. How do you help the business leaders actually help kickstart their business? And it goes to what Aniruddha said earlier, is that, there is a business problem there, which is kickstarting the business, and can communications help in that?
That's a great insight. It's actually going to be how do we go back to work in the new normal. May I request all the participants or not panelists to kindly mute your audio because the buzz is being picked up. A quick request, you can unmute yourself, of course, at any point when you want to ask a question. Over to Ashwani. Ashwani is, of course, the founder and managing partner of Astrum, a database reputation advisory service. And of course, Ashwani needs no introduction for the number of years and vast experience he has in communications. Ashwani, you've recently done this survey with CXOs on the business and economic impact of COVID. What do you think? What was the one finding that surprised you from that survey about how communication can play a role going forward?
So, thank you, Parul, for having me, and it's a great privilege to be able to have this conversation, and to both Aniruddha and Gayatri for joining this this panel. Let me, being from the consulting world and having spent the entire public relations, my entire career in public relations in the consulting side of the business, I'd like to spend my time today talking about the intricacies of public relations management and running that business if anybody's interested. But let me start by looking at getting inside the mind of the CXO. The beauty of the mind of the CXO today is the fact that they have the resolve and the resilience to see this through. They may be down and out right now, but nobody's giving up. So I think the mental orientation is progressive, is positive, and they're enthused and energized to get on with life as we continue to do, as we continue to go forward. And as all pandemics have shown us in the past, there is nothing at this point of time structurally wrong with the economy. So we may get to under 1% to 2% GDP growth, but they also see a weaker economic growth coming back, and they see the economy sort of normalizing in the, let's say, 9 to 12 month horizon. The immediate challenge, of course, for as anybody from a small business owner to micro entrepreneur to a very large organization is same: cash. It's not revenue, it's not profit at this point of time. The immediate preoccupation is liquidity. How can I survive the next 3-5 months because there's absolutely no lines of credit from the banks, or my revenue is gone, my cash is stuck, supply chain stuck. So getting the big part of liquidity is the most immediate concern. And then will come the long-term issue of reinventing business model, pivoting business model, and seeing how we want to adjust to the new reality. That's from the overall mindset. Now, what happens when you sort of bring this to the communication issue? Very two important parts that I think we found out. Well, surprisingly, less than 10% of the companies that we went to and the CXOs we spoke to really had a playbook for a crisis. That's the big challenge. Having a playbook is critical, because 65 to 70% of them said, look, we used our intuition to just sort of figure our way through this and muddle our way through this. And thankfully, some of it came all right. Some of we made some mistakes and learned again. Less than 20% of them actually said that, well, we had some level of preparedness. So I think the big issue is crisis in terms of preparedness. I wrote about this, I think, about almost a month back. I wrote about this to say that, look, crisis communication and preparedness is a critical aspect for any organization. The second thing that came out very important was the centrality of our people. At the end of the day, you may not have customers, you may not have anything, but how your people are, and their safety, their well-being, and more importantly, because of this very remote nature that COVID has forced us to, how do we keep the employees and our people connected with each other, engaged and collaborative, to continue to serve customers, to continue to work? I think employee engagement became a very important aspect of what was key to survival, and then of course our ability to recover, emerge stronger. And the third point, and with this I will finish, and I will just simply say this, that in companies and how companies have behaved during this time is how they will be remembered. How did they care for their customers? How did they care for their people? How did they live their purpose? And rather than communicating their purpose is going to be a critical way in which companies are going to be remembered and how they will be treated in time ahead. Therefore, the centrality of corporate reputation and conduct of companies is going to get scrutinized immensely. And those who would have done the right things would obviously have greater chances of thriving than those who would certainly would not have sort of covered themselves in glory, would find it difficult. So I think those are the overall sort of broad external thinkings. In conclusion, what Aniruddha is saying is very true. My entire life of 25 years, I have maintained three things. One, what customers say is always more important, because it doesn't really matter what the competition does or what does. As long as you're meeting your customers' expectations and your people's aspirations, I think you're going to run a sound business. Right? Being conservative and frugal is always the right thing in your costs, which means that you need to be able to run a frugal business which has focused on profitability over a long period of time. I think that's just good business sense and good business logic in many ways. So running a frugal enterprise is very critical. And three, being close to your knitting. You know, the first question that I ever asked when I came into this business, and I know that'd be interesting, the first question I ever asked myself, I said, what is the stock in trade for public relations? What do we sell? Because we obviously can't be masters of everything. So what is a real product for public relations to be able to market? Therefore, your insight about ecosystem approach and putting a set of capabilities together is absolutely the right way to do, because you can only do what you're good at. Right? This whole idea about 360-degree communication and I'll find the solution. Well, there's going to be a new reality about the fact whether you are able to carry those costs. So I'll end with that. Some very fundamental truths that Aniruddha has talked about. And I think what Gayatri alluded to about the new reality and the prism through which the world will be seen will define how we will engage. And some of my own thoughts about what I think are going to be what's inside the mind of the CXO. Thank you.
Ashwani, to take some of those thoughts to Aniruddha and then Gayatri. Aniruddha, you've done this white paper. Could you share the main findings? And, you know, our audience is a lot of PR professionals from young to senior. And they would really like to know how could we apply those findings to business, because it's not business as usual right now.
Yeah. So, you know, I spoke about the three biggest findings for us. And like I said, the white paper was an accidental outcome for us. Our real objective was, how are we going to be built for the future and how are we going to do that? Because what we found, and especially as we've grown from a startup to a mid-size consultancy, what we found is that it's important for us to think now 5-10 years ahead. As a startup, we were living month to month in the first few years of when we started. But as we started thinking in the long term, we found that this was important. So when we look at the three biggest highlights, for example, are you performance driven? Are you single window driven? Are you depth driven? Now, from a performance driven perspective, the takeaways are we working together as a team to actually create business models or tools or solutions to actually help customers that you can then customize and put through? I think productization of our service to a certain extent and then bringing in certain technology enablers to help do that is very, very important at this stage. And so when we are looking at performance driven, performance also hints at measurability. So it's not only about I think I'm doing well, I have to prove I'm doing well. So that is where technology will play a large role. When we look at single window, for example, same thing with partners. I mean, you know, sometimes we work with partners, we have a great experience. Sometimes we work with partners, we have an okay experience. Where are we going to be able to create a consistent experience? Because my customer doesn't care that my last experience with my partner was great. They care about their experience with my partner. So how am I able to kind of bucket my partners and also understand their strengths and weaknesses as to where to kind of pull which kind of string? So Parul, what we are really seeing is that as a communicator, as an account manager, that role is changing to becoming a project manager. How am I able to get the right people in the play? How am I able to understand that entirely my team understands this business and is able to get into the industry? And then thereafter, how am I able to connect that to what I know and my craft, which is communications, to then scientifically build those messaging and then thereafter propagate or amplify that. And the last portion of depth driven, very, very important. You know, when I met Ashwani a few months back, he used to tell me that my office is in my phone, right? And I think now it makes even more sense because it is really, right? And building a very, very interspersed knowledge management system where your clients are also part of that system, where they're able to kind of add to our domain knowledge, understand what we are doing. I mean, for example, Parul, I'll give you an example. We do ITS. We are almost one step away from learning coding now. And that's how close to the depth that we've gotten. And I've realized until you get to that depth, you'll never know the right type of communication for a tier 1 technology CEO to be speaking, and you're not in a position to do that. So I think that is what that's the real outcome of the white paper and how you could kind of take it forward. And those are some of the overarching outcomes.
Be customer driven, be depth driven to the extent that yes, it might actually be time to learn coding. Great insights, Aniruddha. And of course, what really struck me, what you said is that you need to be a project manager, not just an account executive. You know, the frontline workers of the PR business, the account business. No, you have to be the project manager. With this, I'd like to go over to Gayatri. I'll of course come back to you, Aniruddha, and you to Ashwani next. Gayatri, when we were discussing the webinar today, you mentioned something very important, that we should shift away from calling public relations. Could you shed some light on that, and what are the new audiences which have opened up with COVID?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we should stay true to is, you know, what do we do? As professionals, we do things that allow brands to be trusted for organizations. So we are in the business of trust building. And trust building does not happen by just connecting and engaging and being empathetic to only a few audiences. So the trust building has to happen across the entire gamut of audiences that any brand, any organization needs to interact with. At the end of the day, the CEO doesn't care what you do unless you're helping him grow the business, run the business, manage the business. And the biggest help you can give to the CEO is if you can create that level of engagement that allows all of his stakeholders, his suppliers, his partners, his employees, to bring in the level of commitment that is required to make a business successful. So in terms of audiences specifically, you asked, I mean, for communications people today, the audiences are no more limited to media and a few industry bodies or a few government organizations, regulatory organizations that communications people need to connect with. We're talking in terms of employees. We're talking in terms of employees' families, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws. I heard a story about how mother-in-laws were called into the office to engage with them and to help them understand what their daughter-in-laws or their son-in-laws were doing in the organization. We're talking in terms of shop floor workers and managers of those employees and how they communicate. So to that extent, as communicators, we've always been very good at media training our spokespeople. But what we are starting to see is that you need to train managers to be able to communicate with frontline service employees, frontline sales employees. In an earlier conversation, Aniruddha talked about how he is having to work with a client of his to develop a sales deck. Developing the pitch deck that a salesperson will take to the customer is becoming as much part of the communications job as talking to media or analysts or investors or whoever.
I think that's a very good insight. In fact, I'm going to come back to Aniruddha for that example which he had shared earlier about actually having to do sales decks. But before I do that, I'd like to go to Ashwani and ask him, you mentioned being frugal, and that's something which just makes good business sense. From your own experience, what is the biggest advice you can give to communication firms right now about keeping the fires burning in terms of cash flow and being frugal?
Well, look, I can only speak from my experience. It's like crisis. You start digging the well when the fire is raging. There's very little chance that you're going to be able to save your house. Right? And if you haven't already made arrangements for the water to put out the fire, then you're already dead. Right? There's no mine from where you can dig the money. There's no bank from where you can borrow the money without paying significant amount of interest. So there is no magic wand that I can tell anybody to say, well, this is what you can do. I think it's logical that if you are stuck, you better cut so rigorously that you need to probably challenge every single piece of expenditure that you have, and you need to understand what's the value you're driving out of that penny. If you're not squeezing that value out of your penny, then obviously there's something wrong. So I think the first important part that, and I've always practiced this, that if I haven't got my ears and eyes to the ground and haven't seen if I don't see what's coming and what's going to happen, I'm actually letting my customers and my people down. My biggest role as a leader in the organization is to look ahead and see what's coming. And if I can do that with great sense of responsibility and judiciousness, I can help prepare the organization proactively for what's coming. So when Aniruddha met me some time back, it wasn't a vain comment about my organization being on my phone. I understand that technology is the only way you can make, and I have worked for 25 years. And if you ask anybody through my 25 years journey, I'm an avid fan of tech. Work anywhere, anytime, flexibly is my mantra, right? Collaborate from any place in the world. And I used to do that 15, 20 years back when SharePoint and all came in our lives. So that's how I have been. So you got to look ahead and be able to be prepared to ensure that you have the necessary resources. You need to be frugal. You need to look at your cash flow. You need to look at your reserves, because when you really need them, then you won't have them. Right? So that's the big part. Right now, if I will tell you, go beg, borrow to your clients and say, please give me my outstanding. If there is an outstanding receivable, go get it done. If you can convince your clients to give you some 3 months advance because you have trusted relationships, or you can ask for some advance money, get the money in your bank to pay salaries, even reduce salaries for the next 3 to 4 months. Get focused on liquidity through cutting cash and generating resources, either through clients or through some of the other resources you may be there. Because if you don't survive the next 3 months on cash, you can forget revenue and profit, right? So you need the oxygen. So don't run out of oxygen.
So we have some feedback for Ashwani from our participants who are saying that what essentially you're saying is that don't dig the well when you're already thirsty. So great feedback is a comment I've got for you, Ashwini.
I want to add one more. I want to add one more comment to that, because there's some very interesting comments that both Aniruddha and Gayatri made. My entire principle, my life has been driven, and there are several past colleagues and clients and current colleagues on this call, and I ask them only three things. What's the insight you have? How's that insight driving the idea? And what's the impact you wish to create, right? And the whole idea of Astrum is built around these three principles. That's why we call the science of reputation, right? So if you don't know, and Aniruddha saying the right thing, if you don't understand the client's business, and that's really the point where I want to talk about how you want to pivot your business. All my life, I have said only one thing: knowledge, 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 and evidence is the key, which means the know-how. I think every young professional today has to start questioning, what's the know-how I have? When I came into the profession, everybody used to ask me, who do you know? So it was a know-who business. And I said, I don't know. I haven't come from public relations. I came from ITC. I don't know journalists. I don't know editors. But I have the know-how to take your message to the world, because I get your business. I am inside the mind of the CXO because I have been a CXO. So therefore, if you understand the know-how, you've got to think about what's your know-how today. And that's going to be the differentiator about what's going to change in your world. Otherwise, nothing more is going to change. I've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and I'm going to continue to do this for the next 20.
Yes. Thanks, Ashwini. I have a question from Ayushi for the entire panelists, and I think for Aniruddha first. The question is that the use of social media has expanded exponentially during COVID. And so how is it really disrupting the audiences, and how PR is supposed to handle this group of expanded audiences on social media?
Sorry, so if I understand the question, it's about how we are talking about social media now that it's getting more and more propagated?
Yes, that's the question.
Right. So I think, look, I don't think this is only a COVID phenomenon. I think this has been happening for the last 6 months. Maybe a lot of people have started to notice it now because more and more things are happening on digital. We would have probably had this panel in some other physical location, if not this one. And I'll just give a personal example. I had a couple of business pitches last week, and they were so much more efficient on Zoom, because we knew how much time we had. We were able to share a screen. They were able to give the questions. There was a bit of preparedness in it. And obviously, work from home, the only issue with work from home is the missing collaboration and engagement with the team. If you are able to build that digitally somehow, and I know it will never get to the same level as one-to-one face-to-face meeting. And I'm the first propagator of the fact that we need to get to office soon. But at the same time, as long as we're in this situation, social media, digital mediums, collaborative mediums, whether it's a Meet, Slack, Zoom, whatever, these are the ways that you need to keep on engaging. One of the things that we really did well, I feel, looking back of our transition, is that business will never be as usual, but we tried to get as close as possible. And how do we continue with our brainstorms? How do we continue with our engagement as is going forward? To answer directly to the question of social media, I think it's always been happening. And I think that more and more brands are starting to understand social media. They're also starting from a business perspective, getting digitally enabled. I know so many customers today saying, I'm not able to sell digitally. How do I build that? And I think that, going back to Ashwini's comment, that you're building a well too late. And I think you're too late for this one, but you might as well plan for the next one, because this is not the first crisis and not the last crisis, right? So we need to learn from this and go forward. And I think the use of social media now has also become much more sensitized in a way, right? People are understanding that I'm not able to go, and it's not my freedom of speech to say whatever I want without the consequences of it affecting myself, my community, and my organization, right? So everything has to be kind of vetted in that sense. So social media is getting more and more amplified, but I think there is a little bit more of a science and thought process to what we are saying now. People are thinking before they speak on social. It's a good to see.
So I'd like to go to Gayatri. Gayatri, Ayushi has an additional question. What she also is asking is that from the brand's external and internal audiences, who can now freely make comments and can get much closer to the brand than they could in the pre-COVID era. They could, but it's really at a scale which was unprecedented. How does that affect their corporate image, and how does the communicator handle it? As someone who's worked for a number of corporates?
Yeah, so this is something that I always ask my agencies, and I remember a conversation with Aniruddha as well about this. Look, it's not indiscriminate use of social media for brands. Uh, if you are the the brand owner, whether you are sitting inside the organization or outside the organization as a partner to the organization, you should definitely question, what's the need for that brand to employ social media or any other platform of communication. At the end of the day, you should stay focused on building trust and engagement. Now, if trust and engagement come through Facebook, then go do Facebook. But if it gets done only by putting out Hindi language flyers on the counters of shops, then that's the medium and that's the platform you should be using.
True.
So I think social media is like, and I've said this for nearly 20 years now. From the day I got into social media, the first platform I got into was LinkedIn, which was not 20 years, but maybe 15 years ago. It works like any other media. It's just that, you don't have as much of a control as you had in the traditional media. But then as a brand owner, you have to always question, whether there is a need for that. And once you have established the need, then go into the science of it as to, who's the audience there? How are they responding? Are they responding to videos more, or are they responding to, just text post more? Are they responding to your customers speaking better, or are they responding to your employees or your developers speaking on that platform? So then put the the audience lens on top of it, and get scientific and approach it scientifically is what I would say.
I'd like to throw it over to the audience. Amandeep from Paisa Bazaar has a question for Ashwani. Amandeep, go ahead.
Yeah, Ashwani, you mentioned about how companies are treating its employees that will matter in the long run. So we have been hearing or reading the news about layoffs, and I don't want to name here companies. And it's not companies' fault too. Some companies have seen revenue go down by almost 95%. So what impact do you see of such actions in the long term?
Look, we're living in a world where all of these things are a reality. The days of patriarchal organizations where organizations were parents and employees were kids is no longer there. Today, there is mutuality of contract, right? We are equals. At the end of the day, an associate brings some value to an organization creates some value for the associates. Therefore, when this mutuality exists, everything is good. The question is, even in the layoffs, when we have to make difficult decisions, how do we make those decisions? How do we handle those decisions? What's the sensitivity we demonstrate? It's not about doing what is right. At the end of the day, if you've added value, you will certainly be in the circle of preference. But if you haven't been able to add value, you will not be in a circle of preference. So every organization makes those evaluations and then sees what's critical to success and then makes those decisions. The question is, how we handle those difficult situations. I keep talking about the fact that values are all good when everything is going good. The true character of an organization is tested when things are bad. And when adversaries, it has to go through adversity. So if that does that bring out the best in you? If it does, then it will be all right. It doesn't really matter. I'll give you an example. A very person close to me, who I know very, very well, had a dedicated contract with a leading tech organization. 25 people back to back. Client just called one day and said, sorry, from tomorrow we've been told to cut cost. All 25 people are gone. Contract is shut tomorrow. What do? Do you have any option? You don't. So that person, obviously, it could have easily been an email could have been sent, but I know that person well enough. The person flew into the city, spent some time with the people, figured out how to not only compensate for some point of time to continue that cost at their own cost, because the client wasn't paying for them. So they took that additional cost and actually put so much effort over the next 60 days to help them get re-employed, helping them with job offers, connecting them to consultants. I mean, that's a great example, right? 25 people gone overnight, but it's the way you handle the situation that defines you, and that's how you get remembered. So coming back to the same question, if you talk about purpose and the purpose-driven organizations, the moral compass that the purpose provides enables you to do the right things. And what Gayatri talks about building trust is not in what you say. It's first in what you do. If you do the right thing and you do it right, and on top of that, if you layer the communication right, that is the layer of trust and engagement, not by just sending some nice emotional ads and then actually not doing anything about it on the ground. So I hope I've answered your question, Aman.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to just take a 2-minute break. We've been talking for about 35 minutes, and before we go, going to totally throw it to the audience then. Just take a little break, drink some water, grab some coffee.
I'm working on the job.
So just to relax for a few seconds, it's a lot of talking we've been doing, especially our panelists. So just take a small break and we'll be back in 2 minutes. So Amandeep has a second question. Go ahead, Amandeep.
My second question is to Aniruddha. So Aniruddha, you spoke about how the communication should be business, outcome oriented and creating a new category all about. So working in a, startup culture from past 4 years, since the day one, my communication has always been around the business outcomes, how I'm helping a company to create new categories. So since the business outcomes in these scenario will take maybe some time, maybe towards end of this quarter, the business outcomes will come back or business margins will come back. What new normal do you see in the next 6 months, starting in the May itself?
In terms of outcomes, I don't think any business has lost the need to be profitable and continue to accelerate their revenue. So overall, everything that we are doing is going to find either a place on our balance sheet or a place in outside to actually fuel our balance sheet. So either way, it's leading there. But from a 6-month horizon perspective, I think what is going to happen is that after this entire period is over, there is going to be a slight period of rebuild. And in fact, I feel for many companies, this has been and I'm really saying this, it's been a blessing in disguise. They've had to look inside, they've had to retrospect. Companies which were just winging it in a way because their business model had worked for the last decade or 12 years or 15 or 20 years have actually started and gotten questioning themselves. And in fact, this is more of a problem with the larger established companies and less with the startups, because startups just within the startup culture, it's normal to keep on questioning ourselves daily, if not hourly. But some of the larger companies, they become stagnant in their own success. So this is going to allow them to actually look inside and understand what is the business outcome do I need? What is the business outcome of the future? Because until this happened, the only real threat to them was all of these newbies, which if they couldn't compete with, they would just acquire. Now they don't have the cash to acquire. Now they have to compete on the same stadium, right? So how am I going to compete with these 20, 30-year-old nimble companies who can shut on and off, do what they need to do, pivot like they're dancing in business, while I am a behemoth in business? I have 1 lakh people. How do I change overnight? I cannot. How do I compete with them? Which means then the business outcomes start looking at how am I going to start measuring my flexibility, my agility, my nimbleness. How am I going to remain a 1 lakh person organization, behave like I'm a 30 people organization, like a startup, right? So how is that approach going to happen? That's also where communications will come, Amandeep, is that when you're trying to build a culture of a startup within a larger company, it is going to be a very, very big challenge, because there's a theory in these larger companies called belly fat. There is belly fat that's built up, which are mid managers, which have started to almost become furniture in that company and not been challenged for a long time. the CEOs of today are being challenged as to how do I challenge them, because they're so comfortable and they've spent so many years. How do I challenge them to start thinking? So, you know, the business metrics are really changing. It starts with people, moves on to culture, and then slowly the culture will find itself on the balance sheet. So that is where you really need to find the connect, Amandeep, and the metrics will be very unique to this. And the way that you know that you're doing well is not to wait 3 months, is to kind of measure on an hourly basis, not quarterly basis.
So I have a lot of questions coming in. I'd like to go to Atul, who has a question about advising fee structure. Atul, would you like to come in with your question?
Yeah, my basic question is, we all know that many clients, as Ashwani was saying, it's all about the cash, and that's the biggest crisis. I've known of companies which are cutting back on fees, which are asking agencies or consulting partners to work for less. Do you see these changes being longer lasting or only for the duration of this? And would it therefore force the agencies to reskill employees, if not improve productivity, and go for the depth that Aniruddha was speaking of?
Atul, that's a great question. And I'll like to answer this question in two parts. You know, I was a young department head in the ITC running a hotel when the Desert Storm happened. And as you know, when war happens, tourism business just goes for a toss. Travel goes for a toss. And what we used to sell at $100, $150, $200 came to $30, $60, $90. And so we became the $30, $60, $90 price range. Imagine 100 coming to 30. We are facing a similar situation. It took us almost 5 to 6 years after the whole event got over to actually come put the 30, 60 and 90 back 200, 150, 200. So imagine that. So you're going to face a lag. If you think companies are going to come back and use this opportunity to say, well, we cut the cost, now why don't you come back to normal levels and let's talk increase from there? I think it's going to be far and few. People are going to use this opportunity to economize, to be able to see value, and the value derivative is going to be high. And therefore, the question about measurement is a little important question. It's tricky because I don't talk about measurement anymore. I talk about evidence and result. Because measurement is always struggled with what's my matrix, what should I be measuring? Whereas I keep asking the question to the client, so what's the result that we hope to achieve and what's the evidence we have to be able to show that we are getting the results? So to that extent, I think the more evidence we provide, I think the faster the recovery will be to normal levels and maybe even greater value creation. So that's number one from a revenue standpoint. From a cost standpoint, I think one of the most important things that will come out from here is that you will need to be multidisciplinary. And I alluded to that in my first opening comment when I talked about what's going to be your know-how. What's going to be the stock in trade? What's going to be the skill that you're going to be able to bring onto the table? It's easy to say digital, social, this, that. Question is 9 out of 10 guys I meet in public relations don't know anything beyond Facebook post or creating some content and posting them. They don't understand logarithms. They don't understand technology. They don't understand how these things actually work. So what's the know-how? So one important part is that when we talk about creating multidisciplinary talent, we are going to find expanded job descriptions. I think the job description of a PR person is going to change dramatically in the new world. Unless you are multidisciplinary, unless you are able to do a lot more than what you are doing today, I think you're going to be a dinosaur. And trust me, I haven't been saying this if you look at my writings over the years, for the last 5 years that I have written, I have said the same thing. Now, I'll finish my quotation by saying only one thing, what COVID has done. Lenin said in 1919, there are decades when weeks happen and there are weeks when decades happen. Okay, these are the weeks when decades are happening. So if this is not your wake-up call to question your know-how, I don't know when.
That's a great note to end this discussion on. We have several more questions. I have a question for Aniruddha from Shubham, who was earlier with Apollo Tires and now is taking a study break. He says, based on the scale model Aniruddha mentioned, how do PR professionals go from learning business basics across many industry domains? He says coding is okay, but what about healthcare, education, gaming and entertainment?
No, I think that's an excellent question. And that's where today I think that more and more in terms of team structures, in terms of the way that consultancies are built, we will have to have slowly evolve into domain expertise. There will need to be experts for each type of sector who will come in. In fact, we have a think tank that we go to whenever there is a sector that we are unsure of, where we actually bring them in. And this is not something that consultancies need to do from a perspective of when it comes. It is again preparedness. So have we built the sectors that we want to look at? But the second point to this is also that every consultancy needs to have their own focus. Over the last couple of years, we decided our focus was going to be into tech, B2B tech, all types of tech, and that's what we kind of focus upon, which means that it's easier to build our knowledge expertise within that, right? Because the moment I move into healthcare, for example, it's going to be hard for me to get under the skin of every business. And again, coming back to the point that if someone sits and says, I know everything about every business, that person is absolutely lying. So the point is that how are you able to focus in and zone in on the few segments and sectors and micro sectors within those segments that you want to concentrate on and become experts at those while you also understand others. So it is, when you talk about skilling, it's kind of, it's a little ambiguous, right? You want to be multi-skilled, but you also want to be contextually skilled to what you know and what you're talking about. So there is a balance everyone needs to look at. When Ashwini talks about the fact that if you're not going to question your know-how today, when are you going to do it? I think that's a very apt point. But before you question your know-how, I think one more step before that is understanding, what do I want to know? Do I want to know everything, or what do I want? And especially for the younger audiences who are watching this, it's about what do I want to learn? What do I want to make and build my knowledge in? Because then that passion will drive you to get a bigger know-how and a better know-how.
Question what you want to know for the decades that is happening in weeks right now.
Yes.
There's a question from Minal for Gayatri. The question is Gayatri, that in this current time, what are the changes that you will see from the customers, that's the client side, towards the PR firms and partners if they start becoming focused on business outcomes? What is the bandwidth among clients to actually have that kind of conversation?
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question. Is it about, what are the new things that customers will ask for from PR?
He's referring to the customers as the clients, the PR firm clients. If you want to
Right.
talk about business outcomes, then how is that conversation going to happen? I mean, does the client side have the bandwidth to have this kind of conversation, and how will they expect the PR firms to change to show this impact of business outcomes?
Look, the bandwidth is there, and the conversations are happening. The need to restart business and to get back to normal, new normal, whatever we call it, is there. Businesses can't stay closed and shut for a long time. Everyone wants to go back to the normal, right? So those conversations are already happening. Perhaps some of those conversations, like Atul and Ashwini talked about, are in terms of, can you do this for a lower retainer? But there, I think the conversation, pivoting the conversation around value is what is important. So understanding what the business is looking for at this point in time and what is it that they will value at this point in time is really, really important. And that value may be just in providing, help to the HR team to communicate effectively about certain tough decisions that, HR is undertaking. Or it could be, and I can talk about it from first-hand experience, or it could be to, help salespeople to go and have that first conversation as they're starting to sell. So, understanding what is the need of the organization at this point in time is important. And taking the initiative and asking the questions and being open-minded about, taking on new things and not, being restricted to what we have traditionally offered as agencies to clients is very, very important. Ashwini, sorry, you were trying to make a point.
So, Ashwini, I have just hold on a second.
This is a very important question. Parul, 1 second. Minal has asked a very important question that everybody struggles with, and Gayatri's given a very powerful answer. I
So
want to.
just a second, Ashwini. Minal wants to come in and ask the question herself.
Sure.
And after that, I have two specific questions for you, Ashwini, from two of the audience members. So
Yeah.
Minal, please go ahead and ask your question. Minal, are you there?
Unmute yourself, Minal.
Okay, I think there must be some issue. Ashwini, please go ahead. You were addressing that question.
Let me look. This whole question around matrix has been which has bothered everybody. So let me just give. I think Gayatri has said something very, very powerful, and I want people to. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's perhaps the most pivotal three questions that any one of us can ask of our clients today. Number one, how can I be more relevant to you? What do you need from me that will help you? Number one. If that is what it is going to get done, the next question is, so what will success look like for you in this space, right? And the third question is, how will we know that we are succeeding? If you just ask these three questions of your clients, it's about being relevant, it's about understanding and alignment to their success, and the third, understanding the evidence that they will be looking at to be able to know whether we are making success. So the big thing about business outcome, this, that, and the other, it's a long-term thing. Get focused, forget the word measurement for now. Think of two words. Hey, what's my relevance and what's my evidence to be relevant? If you get that right, you're going to get into the zone with the client. And if you can get that into the zone, you'll survive and you'll work with the client. It's a very powerful point that Gayatri has made. And I want to be able to replay that from the consulting side for people who are in the consulting space to understand this. Ask that question. If you don't ask that question and you make an assumption of yourself, you may be thinking you're doing a great job. It could be completely irrelevant to the client. She's telling you, well, it could be as simple as, look, can you help me make a sales pitch? Because I don't know, my sales guys are not enabled to go and sell in the post-COVID environment like Aniruddha is talking about. That's relevance here.
I think that's a very important point the two of you have made.
I want to re-emphasize that very, very strongly for all the young people who are listening on this conversation, that stay relevant and stay aligned to your client.
Stay relevant, offer evidence for relevance, forget about all metrics. These are the only metrics which really matter. Minal is back. Minal, would you like to ask your question?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll take a quick 30 seconds. It's just basically, while of course from an agency side we need to make the requisite changes, which are very important, and we've been seeing that through this discussion. But Gayatri, the question was mainly coming to you from a customer point of view, how this is going to change when consultancies do come with the depth, do come with that approach of business outcomes. How is that the clients are going to kind of have a change in terms of how they brief their partners and their agencies in the future? That's where the thought was coming from.
Look, clients also have to show, as in, if I'm the client, I have my own stakeholders inside the organization, and I need to be relevant to my stakeholders just as you are relevant to me. So it's a cascade. If I don't give you the power or the ability to help me, then I'm not helping myself. And I think that level of relationship and trust between the client and the external partner needs to be there. Without that, it's not going to work. If you have a client who is telling you that, I'm not going to give you anything, but you still need to do some magic out of thin air, then just dump that client.
Correct.
So I have that's a great answer. Actually, this is a time to also be as careful. I have two questions for Ashwani. Then I'll come to Aniruddha and Gayatri. We're actually almost an hour plus into the conversation, but it's been a great conversation. Ashwani, there are two questions for you. One from Washmi. She's saying that how does one balance what the client wants and what the PR firms are reasonably able to deliver in this COVID environment in terms of stories? The second question from Shubham, again from Apollo Tyres, earlier who was at Apollo Tyres, is that do you see a reconciliation and rationalization and mergers in the PR firms happening in the years forward now that COVID has had an impact?
Well, Moshmi has been my former client and a great teacher to my people through and they have learned a lot from them. So Moshmi, thank you for that. Let me answer Shubham's answer first. And Apollo was my client a long time back, so I'm happy to hear his question. Look, mergers and acquisitions are a way of life anytime. There's nothing special about COVID or not COVID. If there's a great opportunity and if there's a meeting of minds and cultures, people will create. Now, what will happen is, because there are cost structures which are going to be under pressure, and Aniruddha alluded to that fact in his conversation, that there will be an ecosystem approach, you may find a lot more collaborative structures emerge, not necessarily M&A. There could be joint ventures, there could be affiliate relationships, there could be some kind of equity absorptions. There could be many formats, but is it going to be some big fish gobbling up small fish? I don't know, because I think you're also going to be in an environment where I call what is called an asset-light model, or a lean, mean, hungry, stay happy model. Are you going to be hungry enough? Are you going to be lean, mean enough? And are you still going to be happy enough? So those days of bloated sort of large organizations perhaps may go, because people will start now thinking from just in time to just in case. So when you start to see a big mind shift from just in case, suddenly the lens through which the world gets seen is going to be very different. So yes, I think in the short, there will be some kind of alignments and realignments in the industry, and some interesting models may emerge. And I'm hoping that they do. I fervently hope that they do. And young people like Aniruddha, who are leading this sort of movement with new ideas and agile organizations, I hope they take the lead. And I hope to see that happen very, very aggressively. Secondly, to Moshmi's question, look, I've always, as a consulting business, and this is not something which is new to me, I always say to my people and my clients, it's not important what you do, it's more important what you don't do. Right? It's very easy to say yes, but it's very hard to say no. But saying no is very important in the consulting world. Let me give you my recent example. There was a client who came to us and had a very specific brief, very prestigious name at that. And we would have loved to have them in our portfolio. They gave us a brief. We said, okay. And they gave us a very, very aggressive commercial proposition. We said, well, we'll come back to you. We did our work. We looked at our estimate of effort and time, and we went back to a commercial proposition. And that commercial proposition wasn't in line with the expectations of the client. Well, we agreed to disagree with the client and said, look, we are sorry that we were unable to rise to your occasion, but unfortunately, we can't do business at the terms that you're proposing, because it's not possible for us. Now, I could be hungry enough and say, look, I just need the money, I'll just see it through. But the fact is, by taking that brief, I would have subjected my people through some terrible time and unrealistic scope of work, just because we would have made some money. The cost of that over a long period of time to my people would have been much greater, and then it would have had a whiplash on how we had the ability to serve our clients. So therefore, I think anything that we do vis-a-vis our scope of work or the brief that we take is going to be very dependent on a realistic, rooted in ground reality of what does it take to deliver and get the work done. If you can't get it done and you don't think you have the capability or the bandwidth to do it, better not to do it. And that's a principle I have followed for 20 plus years in my life. I can tell you, I have never failed. It is something which has always held me in good stead. Choosing what not to do is far more important to me than choosing what to do. So if I can't deliver the stories, I tell the client saying, "मुझे माफ करो भैया, मेरे से नहीं हो सकती, किसी और से करवा लो." But अगर मैं इसे कर सकता हूँ, I will move heaven and earth. And if it's reasonable and it's credible, I will do whatever in my power to make it happen. It's not that we will not serve our clients. We will serve our clients to the best of our ability and move heaven and earth to do what is credible, doable, practical, and rooted in reality and of course, most importantly, professional and ethical. Those lines in our head are absolutely clear. There is no gray. There is a black and white. So the demand of an unrealistic client and a demand of a story in the media, I can't do it. I'd say, माफ करो जी, मेरे से नहीं होता, किसी और से करवा दो.
Thank you all. I can take one final question. We have actually gone over time.
Ashwani, I hope I answered the question.
Yes, she's saying that she sent me a chat saying that it was a great answer and a great.
You tell her Intel में हम यही करते थे.
and she agrees with you completely. So one last question I can take.
She was the best client I had because she's the most reasonable and most understanding. That's why she's asking a difficult question.
So anybody has one final question? Otherwise, we can.
Parul, I have. Parul, I have.
Gayatri sounds familiar.
Amandeep or Soumya? I can't remember.
Amandeep.
Okay, Amandeep, one final question and get the question from the Mantri. So two final questions.
Yeah.
And then we have to move towards closing.
So should I ask? Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
My question is to Gayatri. So someone just asked about having having the knowledge on the product and business side, having worked with agency. So I have worked on the agency side for 9 years and then moved to the client side. So I can see there is a gap. How clients give briefing on the products or on the business. So how Gayatri, do you see this gap a PR professional having worked on the agency side can fill?
So, Amandeep, I think you personally are doing a great job. I know your CEO thinks that you know the business better than him, which is exactly what I would tell everyone in the business, that the CEO should come and say that my agency or my PR person knows the business better than me or as well as me. Better is not possible, but yeah, as well. So how can agencies get to know? I would say ask questions. Ask for access to people who can tell you what the business is all about. Read up from external sources, but I can tell you after being on both sides, on the agency side as well as on the client side, what you read in publicly available materials sometimes doesn't paint the right picture. So ask questions and ask your contact within the organization to help you understand, and ask them to give you access to people who can help you understand. That's all I can say.
So,
here's a new idea. Just a new idea. For all the consulting guys who are on the business, let me just add. If you really want to learn the client's business, go spend your time in the client's office. You don't need office anymore in the whole idea of COVID. Why do you need your own office? Collapse your office and go start spending 2 days and 3 days in your client office. You learn about the client business automatically and you build closer relationship with your clients. That's it. No cost, no overhead, no rent. Go work out of client and build more intimate relationships with them.
How do we do that? Social distancing. How do we do that with social distancing?
No, in time to come. I'm saying the future will be like this. You can build. See, again, I'm saying the vectors that you have to think have to be different. You're struggling with intimate relationships. Your overheads are bloated. What do you want to do? Turn it on its head. Why can't you be in a client office and work with clients as part of the seamless team? You learn the business.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So I'm just going to take a final round of comments from the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. And a very, very warm thank you to the participants for taking their valuable time out. I really appreciate you doing that. So in no particular order, the panelists, please share your main takeaway. Aniruddha, perhaps you first. What's the main advice that you'd like to give on a parting note?
So I think the main advice is for all of us to be extremely agile especially in the next few quarters. And I see this as really a long tail now. I don't see this only in 1 year. I'm slightly more pessimistic than Ashwini is in that case. I think the repercussions of what's going to happen are going to actually last for at least another 3-4 quarters. And we are probably going to be sitting same time this year, same time next year and talking about that. Now I'm seeing the shift up. But yes, there is going to be a huge spike of business for us as a whole. And while all of us are focusing on survival, let's also ensure that we are prepared for the type of business that's going to come, because I personally feel we are going to be overwhelmed by the amount of business that's going to come, because everybody who wasn't prepared today is going to be wanting to be prepared for tomorrow. And the other point I also wanted to make is that, when Gayatri was also talking about the sales pitch and we're talking about business outcomes, we also have to understand the complexities of organizational structures. When you're dealing with large organizations, just only creating one pitch deck is never just the ask. The ask is, how am I going to accelerate my sales, which means also my sales team is 100 people across the world who are selling 20 different products for my company. How are you going to convince them that that this product is more important, and then thereafter enable them to have an elevator pitch to go to the end customer and then get the end customer to yourself? The process is changing, and there are hidden challenges within all the larger objectives that our customers are keeping for us. I hope that we use those insights that Ashwini spoke about, and we use our knowledge and know-how to really get into the depth, to read between the lines, not just go after the one-line brief the client gives, but go between the lines of what the client's not saying. So that's how I would leave it.
Thank you, Aniruddha. Gayatri?
Yeah, I would say that, every crisis gives you the opportunity to, think about what else you can do. And businesses are doing that. As businesses are doing that, I think agencies have the opportunity to do different things. User experiences are becoming important. Now, should agencies get into user experiences, for example? There was conversation about, data-driven work that agencies can do. So I would say treat it as an opportunity, try and get into newer areas. And then maybe there is going to be a blip of, I wouldn't say 4 quarters, maybe 2 quarters, but by the end of the 2 quarters, you will be in a much stronger position to offer a lot more than you're offering as an organization to your client.
Thank you, Gayatri. Ashwani, in conclusion, the final words to you.
Look, any crisis like COVID, which is so unprecedented and all pervasive and all encompassing, is a moment of reflection. So certainly reflection is an important part. But there are 3 R's that I've always held in my life, which have sort of right from the beginning of my career with ITC, I've held this belief. The first R is keep reimagining the world. You cannot be static. You have to keep reimagining, because the pace at which we are changing is very, very furious. So if you are not sort of constantly in the mindset that the world will be reimagined, you are not going to be able to keep pace with it. So keep reimagining the world. But as you keep reimagining the world, the second R kicks in. Keep relearning. Your skills are never going to be static. What was my skill 10 years back isn't the same today. I have to reskill myself. So I have to relearn, right? I have to completely relearn some stuff as I go along. And the third, I should be willing to reinvent myself.
Thank you so much. Thank you also the audience for very patiently being with us. Thank you. The video will be posted soon. Thanks, Aniruddha, Gayatri, Ashwani.
It's a privilege. Thank you, Parul, and to Aniruddha and to Gayatri for their wonderful thoughts. And
thank you.
And
thank you all.
Participants as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Privilege all.
Bye, everyone.